Egbo College was the pride of Delta State, a prestigious school that shaped the minds of future leaders. Politicians, business moguls, and renowned scholars had all walked its grand hallways, and every student who passed through its gates carried a sense of destiny. But no student shone brighter than Okimute, the eternal head boy. For over 20 years, Okimute had won the Golden Prefect badge. His name was on every school award and honor board. He was the model student, brilliant, charismatic, and untouchable. Teachers spoke his name with reverence, juniors hurried to obey his every command, and even the principal treated him with an unsettling level of respect. But the strangest thing about Okimute was that he never changed. Tiga, a newly admitted SS1 student, had always been fascinated by Egbo College's history. He was eager to prove himself, to excel and maybe one day achieve the greatness expected of every student. But something about Okimute disturbed him. One evening, while waiting for his turn at the library, Tiga flipped through an old school magazine from 2003. His eyes widened in shock. Standing at the center of the school's prefect council was Okimute, looking exactly the same as he did today. Same piercing gaze. Same confident smile. Not a single wrinkle, not a single sign of aging. A chill crawled down Tiga's spine. He grabbed another yearbook, this one from 1999. Again, there was Okimute, unchanged. "This is impossible," he muttered under his breath. But as he looked around the library, he noticed something unsettling. The librarian, an elderly woman, was staring at him, her eyes filled with fear. She shook her head slowly, as if warning him to leave the matter alone. Tiga swallowed hard. Something was terribly wrong with Egbo College. And he had just taken the first step into a mystery no one dared to uncover. Tiga could not stop thinking about what he saw in the yearbooks. How could Okimute look the same for so many years? It was not possible. People grow older. People change. But not Okimute. The librarian, an old woman with tired eyes, walked up to him. She bent down and whispered, "Leave it alone, my child. Do not ask questions. It is for your own good." Tiga felt his heart beat faster. Why was she scared? What was she hiding? But before he could ask, she walked away quickly, her wrapper tied tightly around her waist as she disappeared behind the bookshelves. Tiga turned back to the yearbooks. He flipped through more pages, going back to 1995, 1990, 1985. His hands started to shake. Okimute was in all of them. Just then, he heard a soft laugh behind him. He turned and saw Ofuvi, his best friend, grinning. "What are you looking at?" Ofuvi asked. Tiga showed him the pictures. "Look at this. Okimute has been in this school for more than 20 years. And he still looks the same." Ofuvi looked at the pictures, then laughed. "Maybe he just looks like his father. Maybe all the Okimutes in his family look the same." Tiga frowned. "No. This is the same person." Ofuvi sighed. "Then why is no one talking about it? If something was wrong, wouldn't the teacher say something?" Tiga did not have an answer. But he knew one thing, something strange was happening in Egbo College, and he needed to find out the truth. That night, he could not sleep. Why was Okimute still head boy after so many years? And more importantly, what was he doing to stay that way? The next morning, Tiga could not focus in class. His mind kept thinking about the yearbooks. He needed to know more. He needed to find out the truth about Okimute. After school, he ran back to the library. The place was quiet, and the librarian was not there. Tiga quickly went to the old book section. He pulled out the oldest yearbook he could find, 1980. His hands shook as he opened the book. He flipped the pages, searching for the prefect's pictures. And there it was, Okimute Ogonekoro, head boy. Tiga's heart pounded. How was this possible? That was over 40 years ago. A cold wind blew through the library, making the pages of the book flip on their own. Tiga's fingers felt numb. He was afraid, but he had to keep looking. He grabbed another book, 1975. His breath caught in his throat. Okimute was there again. Tiga stumbled back. His legs felt weak. This was not normal. This was not human. Just then, he heard footsteps. Someone was coming. He quickly shut the book and hid behind a bookshelf. Through the gaps in the shelf, he saw him, Okimute. The head boy stood tall, his white shirt crisp, his golden badge shining. He looked around slowly, as if he could feel that someone was watching him. Tiga held his breath. He did not move. He did not blink. Then, Okimute smiled, a slow, knowing smile. He turned and walked out of the library. Tiga let out a shaky breath. He knew one thing for sure now, Okimute was not normal. And somehow, he knew that Tiga was watching. The next day at school, Tiga noticed something strange. One of the smartest students in SS3, Idef, was sitting quietly in class, staring at his book like he had never seen it before. The teacher asked him a question. Idef opened his mouth, but no words came out. I don't know, he stammered. The whole class gasped. Idef was the best student in the school. He always knew the answers. But now, he looked confused, lost. Tiga's stomach twisted. This was not normal. Later that day, he saw F, another top student, sitting alone under a tree. Her eyes were blank, her hands shaking. F, are you okay? Tiga asked. She looked at him, but it was like she didn't know who he was. My head feels empty, she whispered. I don't remember things. I don't even remember my own birthday. Tiga's chest tightened. First Idef, now F. What was happening to the smart students? Then, a thought hit him. Okimute. Tiga looked around the school. There he was, Okimute, standing on the balcony, watching everything with his cold, knowing eyes. Suddenly, Tiga remembered something, the yearbooks. The names of the best students from past years. Where were they now? Why had none of them become famous after leaving Egbo College? A chill ran down his spine. What if they never left? What if something happened to them? And then, a terrible thought filled Tiga's mind. What if Okimute was taking their intelligence? He needed to find out. Before it was too late. Tiga could not ignore it anymore. Something evil was happening in Egbo College, and Okimute was at the center of it. Smart students were losing their minds, and the same head boy had ruled the school for decades. He had to find proof. He had to go where no student dared to go, Okimute's office. That evening, after prep, Tiga waited behind the school hall. Most students had gone to bed, and the school compound was quiet. The night air was cold, and the full moon made shadows stretch across the ground. Slowly, he sneaked toward the prefect's block. The head boy's office was at the end of the corridor, a place no junior student was allowed to enter. He reached the door and placed his ear against it. Silence. His heart pounded as he touched the doorknob. It was unlocked. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was neat, too neat. A large desk sat in the middle, and shelves lined the walls. But Tiga's eyes landed on something strange, a black box covered in white chalk markings. The symbols looked ancient, like something from a secret ritual. His hands trembled as he reached for the box. But before he could touch it, he heard footsteps. Tiga's breath caught in his throat. Someone was coming. He had to hide. He quickly slipped under the desk just as the door creaked open. From the darkness, he saw a pair of polished black shoes step into the room. Then, a familiar voice filled the air, deep, smooth, and full of power. I know you are here. Tiga's blood turned to ice. It was Okimute. And he was smiling. Tiga held his breath, his heart pounding like a drum. Okimute was inside the office. If he found him, it would be the end. The head boy's polished shoes moved slowly across the floor. Tap. 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 He walked toward the black box, his fingers tracing the strange white symbols on its surface. Curiosity is dangerous, Tiga, Okimute said, his voice smooth like oil. Many students before you have asked questions. Do you know where they are now? Tiga clenched his teeth. He knew. The students who lost their intelligence, the ones who became empty. Okimute had taken something from them. The head boy sighed. If you want to live a happy life, forget what you saw. Go back to your hostel, and never speak of this again. Tiga stayed silent. He could not let fear win. Okimute stood still for a moment, then chuckled. Very well. I will give you time to think. He turned and walked out of the office, closing the door behind him. Tiga waited until the sound of footsteps faded. Then, he crawled out from under the desk. His body was shaking, but he forced himself to move. He had to get out of there. As he slipped out of the office, a cold voice whispered in his ear. You cannot run from me. Tiga spun around, but there was no one there. Only shadows. Only silence. He ran back to his hostel, but he knew the truth, Okimute was watching him. And soon, he would come for him. Tiga barely slept that night. Okimute knew. He knew that Tiga was asking questions, searching for answers. And now, he was watching him. By morning, the fear had not left. His hands felt cold, and his stomach was tight. As he walked to class, he noticed something strange. Students were whispering and staring at him. Ofuvi ran up to him, eyes wide. Tiga, what did you do? What do you mean? Tiga asked, his voice shaky. Ofuvi dragged him behind the classroom and handed him a paper. It was the school notice board announcement. Tiga Imuvok, SS1 student, is under investigation for breaking school rules. Prefects are to watch him closely. Tiga's heart stopped. They were coming for him. Just then, a voice spoke from behind them. Tiga, we need to talk. He turned and saw Ejiro, one of the older students. He was one of the best in SS3, but his face looked tired, his eyes sunken like he had not slept in weeks. Meet me behind the dining hall after prep, Ejiro whispered. Before it's too late. Tiga nodded. He did not know what was coming, but he knew one thing, he had no choice but to find out. That night, he made his way to the back of the dining hall. The air was thick, and the trees cast long shadows in the dim moonlight. Ejiro was already there, pacing nervously. When he saw Tiga, he grabbed his shoulders tightly. Listen to me. Okimute is not a normal person. He is not supposed to be here. Tiga's blood went cold. Then who, or what is he? Ejiro swallowed hard. I don't know. But I do know one thing, once he sets his eyes on you, there is no escape. Tiga's breath quickened. Was it already too late for him? Tiga's hands were sweaty as he looked at Ejiro. The older boy's face was pale, his lips trembling. He was truly scared. Tell me everything, Tiga whispered. I need to know the truth. Ejiro glanced around, making sure no one was listening. Then, in a low voice, he said, Okimute is not a student. He has been here for many, many years. He takes the intelligence of the brightest students and uses it to stay young. Tiga felt his stomach twist. But, how? Ejiro sighed. Every year, the smartest students suddenly become empty, like their brains have been wiped clean. Then, Okimute becomes even smarter, even stronger. He looked directly into Tiga's eyes. The teachers know. The principal knows. But no one talks about it. They are all afraid. Tiga's heart pounded. Why doesn't anyone stop him? Ejiro let out a bitter laugh. Who can stop him? He is too powerful. He controls everything in this school. He decides who fails, who succeeds, and who disappears. Tiga shivered. Then what do I do? Ejiro grabbed his hand. Run. Before it's your turn. Tiga wanted to listen. He wanted to leave, to forget everything. But deep down, he knew the truth, if Okimute was not stopped, more students would suffer. Suddenly, a dry, cold voice echoed behind them. It is too late for that. They turned sharply. Okimute stood in the shadows, smiling. Tiga's breath caught in his throat. Okimute was standing there, watching them. His white shirt was spotless, and his golden badge gleamed under the dim moonlight. Ejiro, Okimute said, his voice smooth and calm. You know the rules. Talking too much is dangerous. Ejiro took a step back, his hands shaking. You can't keep doing this forever. Okimute chuckled. Forever. Oh, my dear friend, I already have. His eyes locked onto Tiga. And now, it is your turn. Before Tiga could react, a cold wind blew around them. The trees rustled, and the shadows seemed to grow larger, darker. Tiga's legs felt weak, his mind dizzy. Run. Ejiro shouted, grabbing Tiga's arm. They turned and sprinted towards the hostel. Tiga's heart pounded in his chest. He could hear Okimute's footsteps behind them, calm, steady, unhurried. Just as they reached the hostel gate, Ejiro cried out. Tiga turned and saw him fall to the ground, clutching his head. His eyes were wide, his mouth open in a silent scream. No. Ejiro. Tiga yelled. Ejiro's body went still. His eyes became empty, blank, like all the others. Tiga felt hot tears stain his eyes. Okimute had taken him. The head boy stepped closer, smiling. You cannot fight me, Tiga. This school belongs to me. Tiga gritted his teeth. Not if I stop you first. He didn't know how, but he knew one thing, he was going to end this. Tiga did not sleep that night. Ejiro was gone. Not dead, but empty, his mind wiped clean, his intelligence stolen. Tiga had no time to cry. He had to stop Okimute before more students suffered. But how? Then, he remembered the black box in Okimute's office. It had strange symbols on it. It had to be important. That night, Tiga sneaked out of his hostel and ran toward the prefect's block. The whole school was silent, but the darkness felt heavy, as if the shadows were watching him. He reached the office door. Locked. His heart pounded. He couldn't turn back now. He searched the window, pushing against it, open. He climbed inside carefully, landing softly on the floor. The black box sat on the desk. Tiga touched it, and a strange coldness crawled up his fingers. He had to open it. As soon as he lifted the lid, a gust of wind burst from inside. The room shook, and suddenly, Tiga was no longer in the office. He was standing in a dark underground chamber. The walls were covered in glowing red symbols. In the middle of the room was a stone altar, and floating above it was Okimute. The head boy's eyes shone like fire. Around him, shadowy figures whispered in a strange language. You should not have come here, Tiga. Okimute's voice echoed in the chamber. Tiga clenched his fist. I know your secret. You steal from the students to stay young. Okimute smiled. You are right. And now, it is time for you to join them. The shadows rushed toward Tiga. He had to find a way out, fast. Tiga's heart pounded as the shadows rushed toward him. Cold fingers grabbed at his arms, his legs, trying to pull him into the darkness. He struggled, kicking and twisting, but they were too strong. His mind screamed, I can't win. I'm going to lose my mind like the others. Then, his eyes fell on the stone altar. The red symbols on it glowed brighter each time Okimute spoke. That's it. The altar was the source of Okimute's power. Gathering all his strength, Tiga lunged forward and grabbed the heavy metal lamp from the floor. Stop him. Okimute roared, his face twisting with rage. Tiga didn't stop. With a loud crash, he smashed the altar with the lamp. A terrible screech filled the air. The red symbols flickered and began to fade. Okimute's body jerked, his eyes wide with shock. No. You don't understand what you've done. The shadows around him screamed, twisting and pulling away from Tiga. The air shimmered, and suddenly, he was back in Okimute's office. The black box on the table had cracked open, and a dark mist rose from it. Tiga watched in horror as the mist sank into Okimute's skin. The head boy gasped. His face began to change. Wrinkles spread across his smooth skin. His body shrank as if he were aging rapidly. His golden badge rusted, and his white uniform turned dull and old. Okimute was no longer young. He was ancient. His eyes, now full of fear, locked onto Tiga. You fool. You have doomed us all. Tiga took a shaky step back. Had he really won? Or had he unleashed something worse? Tiga watched in shock as Okimute withered before his eyes. His once youthful face shrunk, his skin sagging like an old man's. His prefect's badge clattered to the floor, dull and useless. You don't understand. Okimute gasped, stumbling forward. The ritual, it kept the school safe. Tiga frowned. Safe. You were stealing from students. You destroyed their minds. Okimute let out a bitter laugh. And yet, I was the only thing keeping something far worse from waking up. The ground beneath them shook. The broken black box let out a deep, echoing groan. The air turned thick and heavy, and for the first time, Tiga felt something even darker stirring beneath the school. A presence. Ancient. Hungry. Waiting. Okimute's weak hands grabbed Tiga's shirt. You broke the seal. If you don't restore it, this school, no, this entire town will suffer. Tiga's mind raced. Had he made a mistake? But then, he thought of Ejiro. He thought of all the bright students who had lost their futures because of Okimute's selfishness. No, Tiga said firmly, the suffering stops now. He picked up the black box and, with one final burst of strength, hurled it against the wall. It shattered into pieces. A violent wind rushed through the room. The dark presence beneath the school let out an angry wail, then silence. Tiga fell to his knees, panting. When he looked up, Okimute was gone. All that remained was his tattered uniform and a pile of dust. The next morning, the school was different. Students who had lost their intelligence slowly recovered. The teachers, once afraid, whispered in relief. And for the first time in over 20 years, Egbo College announced a shocking change. The head boy position is now empty. Tiga never spoke of that night. But sometimes, when the wind howled through the halls, he wondered, had Okimute really been lying? Had he truly destroyed the evil? Or had he only set something far worse free?